There comes a moment in life when the mask is ripped away, when the pretense is no longer believable, and when truth forces its way into the open. Evil thrives in darkness, but it trembles in the light of exposure. It is subtle, cunning, and calculating, working behind the curtain of false smiles, smooth words, and hidden agendas. Yet when you finally discern the truth, when your eyes are open to what has been operating in the shadows, you will notice a shift. Evil never admits itself willingly. Instead, it reacts. It twists, it plots, it deflects, and it strikes. What you are about to see are not random behaviors, but predictable strategies, tactics designed to protect the lie, preserve control, and intimidate those who dare to see through the facade. These patterns are as old as humanity itself. The scriptures tell us that the enemy is both a deceiver and an accuser, a destroyer who thrives on manipulation and fear. When evil people realize that you know their game, they do not repent, they retaliate. Understanding their methods equips you to stand firm, resist deception, and guard your heart with wisdom. Tonight, we will uncover 7 things evil people do when they know that you know. 1. They deny with boldness. Denial is often the first line of defense for those who operate in deception. When confronted with truth, when the veil is pulled back and their actions are exposed, they do not cower in shame or admit their wrongdoing. Instead, they deny, boldly, confidently, sometimes even with a sense of outrage that anyone would dare to accuse them. This denial is not merely a casual no, it is strategic. It is meant to destabilize you, to make you second-guess yourself, to convince others that your discernment is nothing more than suspicion or paranoia. Evil knows that if it can stand firm in denial long enough, some will begin to wonder if the truth is really as clear as you believe it to be. This is the very tactic used throughout history by tyrants, deceivers, and manipulators. Their strength lies not in the evidence of their innocence, but in the sheer audacity of their denial. They count on the fact that most people do not want to believe that evil could exist so close to them. They leverage the natural human tendency to avoid conflict, to assume the best, or to accept explanations that seem reasonable on the surface. Denial, when delivered with conviction, has the power to distort reality. It becomes a tool of gaslighting, subtly making you feel as though you are the one at fault for questioning, for observing, for noticing the inconsistencies. Think about it. When someone insists with unwavering confidence that they have done nothing wrong, when they meet your revelation with calm defiance or even feigned indignation, the weight shifts. Suddenly, the burden of proof feels like it is on you. They are no longer explaining themselves. They are challenging your credibility. The goal is to keep you silent by overwhelming you with their boldness. Evil thrives when good people are silenced by doubt, weariness, or fear of standing alone. But bold denial is more than a defense. It is an offense. It seeks to discredit truth itself. By denying, the deceiver sets the stage for their next move. They can now accuse you of misunderstanding, of exaggerating, or even of fabricating lies. They paint themselves as the victim of false charges, while you become the aggressor. The boldness of their denial is the foundation upon which they will build further manipulation. They know that if they can establish this narrative early, many will believe it, and once perception is set, truth has to fight uphill to be heard. The lesson here is sobering but vital. Do not be surprised when evil denies with confidence. Expect it. Do not let their tone deceive you into questioning what you know. Denial is not proof of innocence. It is often the clearest evidence of guilt when truth has struck a nerve. Stand firm in what has been revealed. Remember, light does not falter when darkness refuses to acknowledge its presence. It only shines brighter. 2. They twist the narrative against you. Once denial begins to lose its power, the next strategy that evil people often employ is twisting the narrative. It is not enough for them to say, "I didn't do it." They must also reshape the story so that you become the one under scrutiny, and they emerge appearing righteous, misunderstood, or even heroic. This is one of the most dangerous tactics because it manipulates perception, and perception in the minds of others can often carry more weight than reality itself. Twisting the narrative allows them to shift focus away from their own guilt and redirect it towards you. Suddenly, your motives are questioned, your words are distorted, and your integrity is placed on trial. The power of this tactic lies in its subtlety. Rarely will they make blatant, unbelievable accusations. Instead, they weave half-truths with lies, wrapping them in just enough plausibility that others begin to wonder if maybe you are the one with the wrong intentions. Perhaps you are jealous, perhaps you misunderstood, Perhaps you are simply stirring up conflict where there is none. By planting these seeds of doubt, they are able to recast themselves not as the deceiver, but as the victim of your misinterpretation or malice. The more convincing they are, the more you find yourself defending what should have been obvious to begin with. This twisting is as old as time. It was in the garden when the serpent asked, "Did God really say?" He did not deny outright what had been spoken, but shifted the meaning, reframed the intention, and sowed confusion. The same spirit operates in people who manipulate narratives today. They will retell conversations with selective memory, omitting details that reveal their guilt while highlighting fragments that cast you in a negative light. They will cloak their words in innocence, claiming they are only trying to clear the air or protect others from misunderstanding, all while subtly discrediting you. One of the most painful aspects of this tactic is how effectively it can sway others. Friends, family, colleagues, or even spiritual communities can be drawn into their version of events. Once the narrative has been rewritten, you may find yourself standing alone, your credibility eroded not by evidence of wrongdoing on your part, but by the cunning craft of their manipulation. This isolation is exactly what evil desires. By controlling the story, they maintain control of the audience and, by extension, control of the environment. To withstand this, you must hold fast to truth without becoming entangled in endless arguments. Every moment spent chasing their distortions is time taken away from the clarity of what you know to be real. Stand calmly in truth and let consistency of character speak louder than their twisted words. Remember, lies require constant maintenance, but truth stands unchanging. In time, their narrative will unravel, but only if you refuse to be drawn into their game. When evil twists the story, it reveals its desperation. And desperation, once exposed, becomes its own undoing. 3. They launch character assassination. When denial and narrative twisting fail to silence you, evil often escalates to an even more aggressive tactic: character assassination. This is the deliberate attempt to destroy your reputation so thoroughly that whatever truth you carry is dismissed before it can gain traction. Evil people know that if they cannot erase the facts, they can try to erase the credibility of the one who speaks them. They understand that once your name is tarnished, your words carry less weight, and once your integrity is questioned, your warnings can be ignored. This is not a battle of facts anymore. It becomes a battle of perception, and they intend to win it at all costs. Character assassination rarely begins with outright slander. It often starts subtly through whispered doubts, side comments, and carefully planted suggestions. A raised eyebrow here, a quiet remark there, an insinuation that you cannot quite refute because it is never said plainly enough to confront. Then, as others begin to repeat these whispers, the attack becomes bolder. Soon, accusations arise that you are untrustworthy, unstable, jealous, bitter, or even dangerous. Every weakness, whether real or fabricated, is magnified. Every misstep in your past, no matter how minor, is weaponized against you. The truth of your message is buried under the avalanche of suspicion about your character. This tactic works because many people are quick to believe the worst, especially when it serves to protect them from uncomfortable truths. If you can be portrayed as flawed or corrupt, then others no longer need to wrestle with what you have revealed. They can dismiss you as the problem, avoiding the disruption that acknowledging the truth would cause. Evil people exploit this tendency, feeding the crowd a narrative that relieves them of the burden of discernment. In doing so, they make you the scapegoat, the distraction that keeps the spotlight off themselves. The most painful aspect of character assassination is that it often works on those closest to you. Friends may grow distant, colleagues may doubt your integrity, and even spiritual communities may begin to view you with suspicion. It isolates you, not by removing your voice, but by convincing others not to listen. This is why it is such a devastating weapon. It attacks the very foundation of relationship and trust. And once trust is damaged, rebuilding it becomes a long and difficult process. Yet this tactic also betrays something about the one who uses it. The very need to attack your character shows that they cannot disprove the truth itself. Lies must tear down the messenger because they cannot dismantle the message. For this reason, you must not despair when you become the target of such attacks. Instead, recognize it as evidence that you have struck a nerve. Stand firm in integrity. Continue to live consistently in truth, for in the end, reputation built on steady faithfulness will outlast the false accusations of those who sought to destroy it. 4. They gather allies to isolate you. When the direct assaults of denial, narrative twisting, and character attacks fail to silence the truth, the next tactic is strategic isolation. Evil people know the power of numbers and the comfort of consensus. They will gather allies, formal and informal, to create a battalion that secures their position and pushes you to the margins. This process is rarely random. It is deliberate and often surgical, selecting those who are influential, impressionable, or indebted to the offender. The goal is to manufacture a community that validates the lie and marginalizes the witness. In such an environment, the truth becomes not merely inconvenient, it becomes socially toxic. Alliances form through persuasion, coercion, or reward. Some are won by flattery and promises, others by subtle pressure, favor exchanged for loyalty, career advancement conditional on silence. There are also those who join simply because it is easier to align with the apparent winner than to stand against the current. Once these allies are in place, they begin to act in ways that make your isolation seem inevitable. Doors close, invitations cease, and once warm relationships cool. Institutions that once offered sanctuary become subtly hostile. As policies are emphasized, conversations are steered, and priorities are reordered to exclude the inconvenient voice. This quiet suffocation is intentional. It keeps the scandal small and the threat manageable. This tactic is effective because people often prefer belonging to the comfortable majority over the costly truth. The social cost of dissent is high, and many will prioritize their standing over the courage to confront injustice. Evil exploits this human frailty. By surrounding themselves with a chorus of agreement, deceivers create an echo chamber that reinforces their story and delegitimizes your observations. The chorus does not need perfect conviction, only volume. Their collective voice becomes the new standard of reality, and your solitary insistence is written off as bitterness or obsession. Isolation becomes the method by which the lie is normalized. Recognize the signs early. Coordinated talking points, sudden shifts in group sentiment, and the subtle policing of who is permitted to speak. Resist the temptation to match their tactics with anger or retaliation. Isolation can be a crucible, but it can also refine clarity. Use the space to sharpen your evidence, strengthen your witnesses, and maintain integrity in action. When allies gather to silence you, it can also expose the structure of their power. Watch who benefits, who fears exposure, and who remains conspicuously silent when moral courage is required. Remember that genuine community is built on truth and love, not on fearful conformity. Do not be deceived into equating numbers with righteousness. Few faithful voices can change many misguided ones when they speak with conviction and consistency. Isolation is painful, but it is often temporary. The same network that forms to protect wrongdoing will fray under persistent light. Stay patient, keep faithful company where you can, and let integrity be your most persuasive ally. In the end, alliances formed against truth unravel, and vindication follows those who endure. Stand firm. 5. They use fear and intimidation as weapons. When exposure threatens to dismantle the carefully crafted image of an evil person, one of the most potent weapons they reach for is fear. If they cannot control you with denial, narrative twisting, or isolation, they will attempt to control you through intimidation. Fear is the language of darkness. It thrives on the instinct to retreat, to remain silent, to withdraw in order to protect oneself from harm. Evil understands that many will compromise truth, not because they no longer believe it, but because they are terrified of the consequences of speaking it. Intimidation, therefore, becomes not just a tactic but a strategy designed to paralyze and neutralize the one who sees through the facade. This fear can take many forms. Sometimes it is overt, threats to your reputation, your livelihood, or even your safety. Other times it is subtle, cloaked in insinuations and warnings. You may hear phrases like, "You don't know who you're dealing with," or "You'll regret making this public." In professional settings, it may appear as veiled threats of termination, blacklisting, or stalled opportunities. In personal relationships, it may show up as emotional manipulation, withdrawal of affection, social ostracism, or leveraging secrets you once shared in confidence. The aim is the same in every case, to make the cost of truth-telling seem unbearable. What makes intimidation so effective is that it does not require actual follow-through. The suggestion of harm is often enough. Evil counts on your imagination to do the heavy lifting, magnifying the threat into something larger than life. Fear takes root in the mind, whispering worst-case scenarios, replaying what-ifs, and convincing you that silence is the safer road. It is psychological warfare, engineered to break your resolve before you even take the next step. But here is the truth. Intimidation is itself an admission of weakness. When someone must resort to threats, it reveals that persuasion and deception are failing. They cannot defend themselves with reason or integrity, so they attempt to dominate through fear. Recognizing this is critical because it reframes intimidation not as a sign of their power, but as evidence of their desperation. The louder they threaten, the clearer it becomes that they have something to lose if you continue standing in truth. In such moments, courage becomes your shield. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means refusing to let fear dictate your actions. History is filled with examples of those who faced threats, intimidation, and even violence, yet stood firm because they valued truth above comfort and integrity above safety. Fear loses its grip when you resolve that your life is not built on the approval or threats of men, but on the unshakable foundation of what is right. When evil wields intimidation, see it for what it is: a desperate attempt to keep you silent. Do not shrink back. Stand steady, not in arrogance, but in the quiet confidence that truth cannot be intimidated forever. Light exposes, and once revealed, no threat can put it back into darkness. 6. They play the victim to gain sympathy. When denial, twisting the story, character assassination, isolation, and intimidation all begin to fail, evil often turns to one of its most deceptive tactics: playing the victim. This maneuver is cunning because it disarms those who would otherwise hold the guilty accountable. By portraying themselves as the wounded party, evil people attempt to redirect attention, evoke sympathy, and place the burden of guilt onto those who confront them. Instead of being seen as the perpetrator, they want to be seen as the one who has suffered unjustly. This tactic confuses the narrative, turning justice on its head and making the truth-bearer appear as the oppressor. The victim card is played with skillful timing. When evidence is too strong to deny, when their intimidation fails to silence, the manipulator suddenly appears fragile. Their tone softens, their demeanor changes, and they begin to speak in ways that evoke pity. They may cry, lament how misunderstood they are, or claim they are being persecuted unfairly. They might say things like, "I can't believe you would think that of me after all I've done for you," or "Everyone is against me and I don't know why." These statements are designed to shift the emotional atmosphere. Instead of focusing on the harm they have caused, people begin to worry about their feelings, their well-being, and their supposed suffering. This tactic works because human hearts are naturally inclined toward compassion. Most people do not want to see others suffer, and evil exploits that instinct. Once sympathy is stirred, accountability fades into the background. Conversations that should be about truth and justice become about comforting the deceiver and questioning whether the accuser has been too harsh. The true victim, the one harmed by their schemes, often gets lost in the noise, while the perpetrator gathers new defenders under the guise of being the one unfairly treated. What makes this tactic especially dangerous is that it can split communities. Some will side with the deceiver out of pity, convinced that no one so broken could also be guilty. Others will see through the performance and recognize it as manipulation. The result is division, suspicion, and conflict, not centered on the original wrongdoing, but on how the so-called victim is being treated. By making themselves the focus, they effectively stall accountability and entrench themselves further in the sympathy of others. But the performance cannot last forever. Sooner or later, the mask slips, and the inconsistencies between their words and actions begin to show. Tears may dry, but patterns remain. The same behaviors that exposed them before will surface again. The lesson for us is to remain discerning. True victims do not deflect accountability or manipulate sympathy to escape responsibility. Real brokenness does not demand protection at the expense of truth. When evil plays the victim, remember this: compassion must never be divorced from discernment. Pity without wisdom becomes a tool in the hands of the manipulator. Do not be swayed by the performance. Stand firm in truth, for sympathy misplaced is as dangerous as silence. 7. They escalate until exposed completely. When all other tactics fail, when denial crumbles, the narrative loses its grip, the attacks on your character fall flat, alliances weaken, intimidation backfires, and even the victim act no longer convinces, evil has one final recourse: escalation. This is the last desperate push to maintain control, and it often comes with heightened aggression, reckless behavior, or dramatic attempts to silence the truth once and for all. Escalation reveals the core of evil. It cannot live peacefully with exposure. When cornered, it lashes out, hoping that one final surge of chaos will overwhelm resistance and re-establish dominance. Escalation can take many forms. Sometimes it looks like open hostility, explosive anger, public outbursts, or extreme accusations that seem disproportionate to the situation. At other times, it may manifest in subtler ways: intensified manipulation, greater secrecy, or desperate attempts to enlist new allies. Financial leverage, legal threats, or social smear campaigns may be unleashed in rapid succession. Evil may even resort to self-destructive actions, willing to damage itself if it means taking you down in the process. The aim is not reasoned defense, but shock and awe, an overwhelming display of resistance meant to exhaust you into surrender. What makes escalation particularly dangerous is that it thrives in confusion. When chaos erupts, when emotions run high, people often stop asking careful questions. Evil seizes this opportunity, hoping that in the storm of heightened conflict, the original issue will be forgotten. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what they did, but about the uproar surrounding it. They create noise to drown out the signal, hoping that fatigue will make truth seem like a luxury few are willing to pursue. Yet here is where evil often overplays its hand. Escalation, though frightening, is also revealing. In the desperation to maintain control, the mask slips entirely. Their true nature is no longer veiled in subtlety or performance. It erupts in full view. What was once hidden in whispers becomes evident in shouts. Patterns that were difficult to prove become undeniable as they repeat themselves with greater intensity. Those who once doubted begin to see clearly because escalation exposes what denial once concealed. The key for you is not to be swept away in the storm. Do not let their fury define the battlefield. Remain anchored, calm, and steadfast in truth. Escalation feeds on reaction. It seeks to provoke you into missteps that can be used against you. If you remain steady, their unraveling becomes evident to all. Patience becomes a weapon, and silence at times speaks louder than any defense. Escalation is the final gasp of control before collapse. Evil cannot sustain itself indefinitely against truth. Lies demand energy, intimidation requires constant vigilance, and manipulation drains resources. Truth, by contrast, is self-sustaining. In the end, it is not the deceiver who prevails, but the light that exposes them. So when escalation comes, do not fear. It is the sign that exposure is near, and that what was hidden in darkness will soon be brought fully into the light.